The sun had just begun to rise, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. The sea stretched endlessly in every direction, a calm yet mysterious expanse that hid more than it revealed. The explorer adjusted the brim of his weathered hat and tightened the straps of his backpack. For weeks he had sailed through uncharted waters following old maps, strange rumors, and the instincts that had guided him through countless adventures. He was not one to shy away from the unknown. The unknown was exactly what called to him. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of salt and seaweed. He took a deep breath and scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of life or land. His small boat cut through the gentle waves, leaving a thin trail of foam behind. He had grown used to the solitude. Days and nights alone on the water sharpened the mind, made the senses keener, and sometimes it made the heart race in ways the safety of civilization never could. As he navigated the quiet waters, a fog began to form, rolling in like a silent curtain. The mist swallowed the horizon, turning the world into a gray, endless nothing. It was beautiful and unnerving all at once. He slowed the engine and let the boat drift, peering into the gray void. Fog had a way of hiding things until they were almost too close to ignore, and he had learned to trust his instincts when the fog whispered. Hours passed. The silence of the sea broken only by the soft lapping of water against the hull. The explorer's eyes scanned the haze, looking for the familiar shapes of rocks or islands or even the distant silhouette of another vessel. Then through the thick mist he saw it, a shadow at first, then a massive shape slowly emerging as if it had been waiting for him to notice. He blinked and rubbed his eyes, convinced it was a trick of light or fog. But the shape did not vanish. It grew larger, more defined, until he could see the contours of a giant ship. Its size was staggering, far beyond any modern vessel he had ever seen. The hull rose high above the water, and the masts, or what remained of them, stretched like skeletal fingers toward the sky. The ship seemed old, ancient even, but somehow it looked untouched by time. The explorer's heart raced. He had seen many things in his life, but nothing like this. No shipping records, no maritime charts, and no stories from other explorers mentioned a ship in these waters. It should not exist. And yet here it was, impossibly real, looming in the mist like a ghost from another era. He brought the boat closer, cautious but driven by curiosity. Every instinct told him to be careful, but every fiber of his being urged him forward. The closer he got, the more he could see the details. The wood of the hull was darkened with age, streaked with rusted metal. Strange markings were carved into the sides, symbols that did not belong to any language or culture he recognized. The ship's name, if it had one, was lost to time. He ran a hand along the railing of his small boat and studied the giant vessel. The deck was empty and no sign of life stirred. Yet there was a presence about the ship, a feeling that it was waiting for someone, watching even. A shiver ran down his spine and he swallowed hard. He had chased mysteries before, but this was different. This was a discovery that could change everything he thought he knew about the world. The explorer tied his boat to what remained of a rope dangling from the ship's side. The wood creaked under his weight as he stepped onto the deck. Dust and salt covered the surface, but the air was strangely still. He took slow, careful steps, his eyes scanning every corner. The deck was vast, far larger than any ship he had boarded before. Broken barrels, old crates, and fragments of furniture littered the space, hinting at a life that had once been carried here. He moved toward the center of the deck, where a large staircase led downward. The darkness below seemed to swallow the light from the fog outside, and he hesitated. A deep breath, a moment of steadying himself, and he descended. The stairs groaned under his weight, echoing in the hollow space. Shadows danced across the walls as he stepped cautiously, each movement deliberate. The lower deck was a maze of corridors, rooms, and passageways. Some areas were completely intact, with wooden floors and walls that seemed preserved despite years of exposure. Others were decayed, crumbling under the weight of time. He found cabins with remnants of personal belongings, books, maps, tools, and clothing, turned brittle with age. Each item told a story, but the story was incomplete, leaving only questions behind. In one cabin he found a journal, its cover worn but surprisingly intact. He opened it carefully, the pages fragile and yellowed. The handwriting was precise, elegant, and completely unfamiliar. It spoke of journeys to unknown lands, of experiments and discoveries, of warnings written in a tone that hinted at fear and secrecy. The explorer's curiosity burned brighter. Whoever had been here had known things that were beyond ordinary understanding. and perhaps beyond ordinary history. He walked from room to room, finding more clues. A strange device that seemed mechanical but unlike anything he had seen, charts of stars that did not match any known constellations, and notes scribbled in a language that hinted at intelligence far advanced or foreign. Each discovery was more puzzling than the last. He could feel his mind racing, trying to piece together the puzzle, but the more he uncovered, the greater the mystery became. Suddenly, a faint sound echoed through the corridors. It was a low hum, almost imperceptible, like the ship itself was alive. The explorer froze, straining to hear more. The sound stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its place. He could not tell if it was his imagination or something real, something hidden deep within the ship. He took a deep breath and reminded himself to stay calm. Curiosity must be tempered with caution, especially when the unknown might hide dangers. Hours passed as he explored, each step revealing more of the ship's secrets. The sun outside moved across the sky, the fog thinning and thickening as if the ship existed in its own time, untouched by the world outside. The explorer felt a strange connection to the vessel, as if it were a living entity sharing its story slowly, piece by piece, only with those brave enough to venture inside. By the time he returned to the main deck, the light had shifted, casting long shadows across the ship. The horizon was visible again, but the ship seemed even more isolated now, standing alone in waters where no ship should exist. He leaned against the railing of his small boat, staring at the massive hull and trying to process what he had seen. This was not just a discovery, it was a doorway into a history that had been lost or hidden, a chance to uncover something extraordinary. As evening approached, he secured his boat and sat down, taking notes and sketching the outlines of what he had seen. Every detail mattered: the strange symbols, the unusual construction, the preserved cabins, the mysterious journal. He felt a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. The discovery was incredible, but it carried questions he could not yet answer. Night fell and the ship was bathed in moonlight. The explorer stared at it silently, thinking about the journey that lay ahead. He knew this was only the beginning. Whatever story this ship held, it would not be revealed easily. There would be challenges, dangers, and mysteries waiting at every turn. But he was ready. He had faced the unknown before and survived, and the thrill of discovery burned stronger than fear. With the waves gently rocking his boat, he drifted into a light sleep, still staring at the giant ship. Dreams of distant lands, strange technologies, and untold histories filled his mind. The ship remained still, silent and watchful, as if acknowledging his presence. He did not yet know the secrets it held, but he felt certain that this encounter would change everything, for him, and perhaps for the world. The first part of his adventure had come to an end, but the story of the giant ship, the one that should not exist, was just beginning. The explorer would return in the morning, ready to step back into the shadows of history and unravel the truth hidden within the massive, mysterious vessel. And as he drifted to sleep, the faint hum of the ship seemed to whisper, as if inviting him to continue the journey, to uncover what lay hidden beneath its decks and beyond the edge of known waters. The morning broke slowly, with soft light spilling over the calm sea. The fog that had once hidden the giant ship had lifted, revealing its full size in the pale sunlight. The explorer sat in his small boat, staring at the colossal vessel. Every detail he had glimpsed the day before now seemed more real, more tangible. The carvings along the hull, the strange angles of the deck, and the tall, broken masts created a feeling of awe and unease. The ship was enormous, far larger than any vessel built in modern times, and its presence here, in a place no map marked, was impossible. Yet it floated quietly, almost patiently, as if waiting for him. He tightened his gloves and checked his equipment. A notebook, a camera, a flashlight, and a small toolkit were all he had brought. Nothing could fully prepare him for the unknown. He took a deep breath and pushed off from his boat, moving carefully along the ship's side until he could step onto the deck once again. The wood groaned under his weight, a reminder that the ship, while intact, was ancient. Dust and salt covered every surface, but there was something about the vessel that suggested it had been preserved in a way that defied logic. His first steps were cautious. Yesterday he had seen only the surface, but today he intended to explore more thoroughly. He moved toward the main hatch that led to the lower decks, pausing to study the strange symbols etched along the walls. They were intricate, almost like a language, but entirely unknown. He traced his fingers lightly over them, feeling the grooves and imagining the hands that had carved them. Whoever had built this ship had left clues, but the meaning was hidden, waiting for someone willing to search for answers. Descending into the shadowed corridors, the explorer flicked on his flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating narrow hallways and doors slightly ajar. He moved carefully, listening to the creaks and groans of the ship. Each sound echoed strangely in the hollow space as if the vessel itself were alive. The air was thick with dust, yet faint traces of something else lingered. Perhaps oil, or old machinery, or something he could not name. It was the scent of history, mixed with a mystery that made his heart race. He entered a room that appeared to be a kind of study. Old maps and charts were spread across a desk yellowed with age. Strange instruments lay on shelves, compasses that did not point north, devices with needles that quivered without explanation, and books bound in materials he did not recognize. He examined them carefully, noting every detail. The charts showed places he did not recognize, coastlines and islands that did not exist on any modern map. The handwriting in the margins was precise, deliberate, and full of annotations that suggested a mission of discovery unlike any other. He paused at a small journal he had seen before, now studying it more closely. The pages described journeys into unknown territories, encounters with storms that seemed unnatural, and sightings of phenomena that had no logical explanation. The author of the journal wrote with a mixture of excitement and fear, hinting that the mission was not just exploration but something secret, something dangerous. The explorer could feel the tension in the words, as if the writer had been aware of forces beyond human understanding. Moving deeper into the ship, he found the living quarters. Some cabins were simple, with a bed and a few personal belongings. Others were more elaborate, with shelves full of books, tools, and objects that defied categorization. Each cabin told a story of people who had lived, worked, and perhaps disappeared here long ago. The explorer could almost imagine them walking these corridors, their footsteps echoing softly, unaware that time would eventually swallow them. He entered the mess hall, a vast room with tables and benches. The floor was covered with debris, but he noticed carvings on the walls, patterns and symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the light of his flashlight. He knelt down to examine them, brushing away layers of dust. There was a rhythm to the carvings, a repetition that suggested meaning. He could not understand it yet, but he knew it was important. Perhaps it was a code, a message left for those who dared to come this far. As he explored, he noticed subtle changes in the ship's atmosphere. Certain areas seemed colder, the air heavier. His footsteps echoed differently in some corridors, and shadows moved in ways that did not match the light. He paused several times, listening and watching, feeling a presence that he could not identify. It was not frightening in the ordinary sense, but it made him aware that he was not merely walking through an empty vessel. Something unseen lingered, waiting, observing, or perhaps guiding. He discovered a staircase leading further down, into the bowels of the ship. The steps were narrow and steep, descending into near-complete darkness. With a flashlight in one hand and his notebook in the other, he took each step carefully, aware that he was venturing into unknown territory. The air grew colder and damper, carrying the scent of rust and old machinery. Here, the ship felt less like a vessel and more like a hidden world, preserved for centuries, untouched by time or human memory. At the bottom of the staircase, he found a room filled with mechanical equipment. Massive gears, pipes, and strange contraptions filled the space. Some moved slightly, as if powered by a force he could not see. He examined them closely, tracing the lines and trying to understand their purpose. The design was unlike anything he had studied in engineering or history books. It was advanced yet ancient, as if the knowledge to create it had been lost to time. The explorer's mind raced with possibilities. Could this ship have traveled far beyond what was thought possible? Could it hold secrets of technology that no one alive had ever seen? As he moved through the machinery, he noticed small compartments tucked between the larger devices. Opening one, he found a collection of tools and objects that seemed both familiar and alien. Instruments with dials, levers, and inscriptions, some marked with numbers, others with symbols he could not read. He carefully recorded each item, photographing them and making sketches. The more he discovered, the more he realized that this ship was more than a simple vessel. It was a record of knowledge, a repository of secrets, and perhaps a warning. Suddenly, a noise echoed through the corridor, a low metallic hum that seemed to vibrate through the floor. The explorer froze, listening intently. The sound was not loud, but it was unmistakable. It moved through the room, sometimes fading, sometimes intensifying. His heart quickened. He had heard nothing like this before, and it suggested that some part of the ship was still functioning, still alive in a way that defied explanation. He moved cautiously toward the source of the sound, flashlight sweeping over the machinery. One of the larger devices had a small panel glowing faintly, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the hum. He knelt to examine it, tracing the lines of wires and gears. The panel contained symbols similar to those on the walls and in the journal. Somehow the ship's design, the inscriptions, and the machinery were all connected. The explorer realized he was seeing the beginnings of a mystery that might never be fully solved, yet he could not turn away. Time passed unnoticed. Hours slipped by as he explored, documenting, sketching, and taking careful notes. The sun climbed higher, though the corridors were dark enough that the light did not reach. Every room held new surprises, strange devices, remnants of personal belongings, and hints of the lives of those who had once inhabited this floating world. The explorer felt a deep connection to them, a sense of shared curiosity and courage. They had ventured into the unknown, and now he was following in their footsteps. He stopped in a small chamber that appeared to be a kind of observation room. Portholes lined the walls, some cracked but still intact, offering views of the endless sea outside. He sat on a bench, notebook in hand, and tried to absorb the enormity of what he had discovered. The ship was more than an anomaly. It was a living story, a bridge between past and present, known and unknown. He felt both humbled and exhilarated. This was a discovery that could rewrite history, but it was also deeply personal. He was standing in the presence of human courage, ingenuity, and the relentless drive to explore. As evening approached, he decided to rest. He returned to the main deck, securing his boat once more, and sat with his legs dangling over the side. The sun dipped toward the horizon, casting golden light across the water. The ship seemed to glow in the fading light, its presence even more majestic and mysterious. The hum from earlier had faded, leaving only the sound of waves and the gentle creaking of the vessel. He took a deep breath and reflected on the day's discoveries. The giant ship, impossible as it was, held secrets waiting to be uncovered. The strange symbols, advanced machinery, and remnants of past lives all pointed to a story far greater than he could yet imagine. And though the journey was only beginning, he knew that each step forward would bring him closer to understanding something extraordinary. Night fell again, and the ship stood silent and patient. The explorer sat in his boat, staring at the massive silhouette, thinking of the paths he would take tomorrow. There was no fear now, only anticipation. The unknown had a way of testing courage, of challenging every assumption, and of rewarding those willing to persist. He was ready to face whatever the ship would reveal next. The giant vessel seemed to breathe under the moonlight, quiet but alive, a guardian of secrets lost to the world. The next morning, the explorer woke to a pale, quiet light that reflected softly off the water. The ship loomed larger than ever, casting long shadows across the small boat that had become his temporary base. He stretched, feeling the aches of yesterday's exploration in his muscles, but his mind was already racing ahead. He knew that the surface had revealed only part of the story. Today he would go deeper, further into the corridors and rooms that had seemed mysterious before. Searching for answers he didn't even know he needed. He climbed back onto the deck, stepping carefully over the worn wood. The air was cool, with a hint of salt and the faint scent of something else, almost metallic, lingering from the machinery below. He paused at the edge of the deck, looking out over the calm water. For a moment, he allowed himself to simply observe the vastness around him, the quiet that surrounded this isolated place. Then, taking a deep breath, he turned back toward the hatch leading to the lower decks. The ship greeted him like an old, silent friend, groaning softly as he descended the stairs. His flashlight cut through the shadows, revealing hallways lined with doors, some closed, some slightly ajar. Each step echoed in the hollow corridors, a reminder of how empty this ship truly was, or at least how empty it appeared. He felt the weight of history pressing around him, a presence that was not threatening but demanding attention, demanding respect. He started with the room he had only glimpsed the day before, a small library tucked into the corner of the ship. Dust covered the shelves, but the books themselves seemed surprisingly well preserved. He ran his hands along the spines, noting the unusual materials. Some were bound in leather, others in fabric he could not identify. The pages were yellowed, and the handwriting inside was intricate, full of careful diagrams, sketches, and notes. He realized that whoever had written them had been meticulous, recording observations and ideas that might have been lost to time. One book caught his attention more than the others. It was a journal, but different from the one he had found yesterday. This one contained sketches of strange landscapes, mountains that seemed impossible, and coastlines that did not appear on any modern maps. He flipped through it slowly, noting small annotations in the margins, measurements, angles, and symbols he still could not understand. There were references to storms and currents, as well as mysterious phenomena that suggested the ship's mission was not only to explore unknown lands, but to observe things no one else could. As he explored, he noticed subtle changes in the ship's atmosphere. Some areas felt warmer, almost alive, while others were colder, carrying a dampness that seeped into his clothes. Shadows shifted strangely along the walls as though the ship itself were responding to his presence. He paused several times, listening and watching, trying to understand what he was feeling. It was unsettling, but not frightening, more like being watched by a guardian who had long ago grown used to silence and secrecy. He moved toward the engine room, the pulsing hum from yesterday still echoing faintly in his memory. The staircase leading down was narrower than before, and the air grew heavier as he descended. Each step brought new sounds: the faint hiss of metal, the occasional drip of water, the creaking of mechanisms long dormant. His flashlight beam flicked across large gears and pipes, most of them covered in rust but still intact. The scale of the machinery was staggering, far larger than anything he had seen on modern ships. The deeper he went, the more he felt that the ship was a living record of knowledge, a repository of secrets left behind by people whose ambition and skill were beyond ordinary understanding. He studied the panels and devices, some of which seemed to have no purpose he could comprehend. They contained symbols and inscriptions similar to those in the journals, suggesting that the ship's design, its tools, and its journey were all connected in ways he had not yet grasped. In one corner, he found a small compartment tucked beneath a massive machine. Inside were more personal items: tools, small instruments, and fragments of charts. He examined them carefully, documenting everything. Some objects were familiar, others completely alien. There were devices with dials and levers that did not seem to follow the rules of mechanics he knew. He could not begin to imagine how they had worked or what purpose they had served. Yet the precision and care in their construction hinted at intelligence and skill far beyond what he could see. Suddenly he heard a faint noise, a soft shuffle, almost like footsteps. Though he was certain he was alone, his heart quickened. He paused, holding his breath, listening. The sound stopped, leaving only silence and the distant creaking of the ship. He moved cautiously, sweeping his flashlight over the shadows. There was nothing visible, but the feeling of being watched lingered. He reminded himself that this was a ship with secrets, and that his imagination could easily turn shadows into threats. Yet deep down he could not shake the sense that the presence was real, though its nature remained unknown. He continued exploring, moving through corridors filled with rooms that seemed frozen in time. Some were laboratories with broken instruments and glass containers. Others were living quarters, personal spaces abandoned abruptly. Each room told a story, a fragment of a larger narrative that he could only glimpse. The explorer felt a mixture of excitement and reverence. This ship was not just a relic. It was a world unto itself, a place where history, technology, and human ambition intersected in ways that defied ordinary understanding. He paused in front of a large doorway, one that led into what appeared to be a central chamber. The walls were lined with more symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. He stepped inside slowly, feeling the hum of the ship in his chest. The room was vast, with a high ceiling and a floor covered in strange markings. In the center was a large table, surrounded by instruments and charts. The symbols on the walls seemed to pulse slightly, as if reacting to his presence. He studied them, tracing his fingers along the grooves. There was a pattern, a rhythm, a logic that he could not yet decode. As he examined the chamber, he noticed a small hatch leading downward. He opened it carefully and peered inside. A narrow passage descended further into darkness. The air that escaped smelled of oil and metal, and the faint hum he had heard earlier grew stronger. His heart pounded with anticipation. He knew that whatever lay beyond might hold answers or danger, yet he felt compelled to continue, driven by the same curiosity and determination that had brought him to this ship in the first place. Descending the passage, he entered a lower deck unlike any other. The machinery here was massive, with pipes and gears that seemed to stretch endlessly. The hum was louder, resonating through the walls and floor. He could feel vibrations under his feet, subtle but unmistakable. This was the heart of the ship, a place where power and mystery intertwined. He carefully studied the panels and devices, noting every detail. There were levers, switches, and inscriptions that hinted at functions he could not yet understand. Some mechanisms seemed dormant, while others moved slightly, responding to forces he could not see. In one corner, he discovered a set of journals, stacked neatly as if waiting for him. Their pages were filled with diagrams and notes, describing experiments, voyages, and observations. The handwriting was precise, the language unfamiliar but methodical. He read carefully, trying to connect the dots. The journals hinted at missions that went beyond ordinary exploration, mentioning lands and phenomena that did not exist in known records. There were warnings, too, cryptic lines that suggested danger for those who did not understand. Hours passed as he moved through the lower decks, each step revealing more of the ship's secrets. He found rooms filled with instruments, maps, and personal belongings. Each discovery added pieces to the puzzle, yet the full picture remained elusive. He realized that the ship was not merely a vessel but a record, a message, and a challenge left for those brave enough to seek it. As he explored, he felt a strange connection to the people who had once inhabited this ship. Their ambition, curiosity, and courage resonated with him. He could almost imagine them walking these corridors, conducting experiments, charting unknown waters, and leaving behind the clues that he now followed. The ship was alive with their presence, even if they themselves were gone. Toward evening, he returned to the main deck to rest, his mind racing with the day's discoveries. The sun dipped low, casting golden light across the water. The ship stood silent, immense, and mysterious. The explorer leaned against the railing of his small boat, jotting notes, sketching diagrams, and reflecting on what he had seen. He knew that the journey was far from over. The ship held secrets that might take days, weeks, or even longer to uncover. Yet he felt ready, driven by a sense of purpose and the thrill of discovery. Night fell, and the ship seemed to glow under the moonlight, its massive hull reflected in the calm water. The explorer sat quietly, listening to the distant hum that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. He thought about the mysteries he had uncovered and the questions that remained. The journals, the machinery, the symbols all hinted at a story far greater than any ordinary exploration. And though he did not yet understand it, he knew he was part of that story now. The morning was quiet, but the explorer felt a restless energy in the air. The giant ship had always seemed alive, and today it felt more aware than ever. The sunlight reflected off the water, casting sharp patterns on the hull. From the small boat, he climbed onto the deck, muscles still stiff from the previous day, but his mind focused and alert. He knew that today would be different. The lower decks, the strange devices, and the journals had hinted at something beyond ordinary discovery. Today, he would find answers, or face challenges he had not yet imagined. He descended into the corridors with cautious determination. Each step on the groaning wood echoed through the ship, accompanied by the faint hum he had come to recognize. The air was cooler now, damp and heavy with the smell of metal and salt. Shadows stretched along the walls, flickering with his flashlight. The explorer moved carefully, noting the areas that seemed almost untouched by time. Dust lay thick, but certain devices and panels appeared almost as if someone had used them recently. He entered a chamber that seemed like a command center. The walls were lined with dials, switches, and panels that pulsed faintly with an otherworldly light. He approached a large console in the center, tracing the symbols carved into its surface. Some matched the markings in the journals, others were entirely new. He studied them carefully, pressing buttons and flipping switches cautiously. Nothing happened at first, but he felt a subtle vibration beneath his feet, as if the ship was reacting to his presence. His heart raced, a mix of fear and excitement pushing him forward. Moving deeper into the lower decks, he noticed that the hum grew louder, vibrating through the walls and floor. Pipes and gears stretched endlessly, some covered in rust, others surprisingly well preserved. The scale of the machinery was unlike anything he had seen before. He traced the lines of conduits and panels, imagining the forces that must have powered them. Somewhere in this maze of metal and mechanisms lay the secret of the ship's power, a power that had allowed it to travel where no ordinary vessel could go. In a narrow hallway, he noticed a door slightly ajar. Pushing it open, he discovered a small chamber filled with objects that seemed both familiar and strange. Instruments, charts, and devices lay scattered across tables. Some were mechanical, others almost organic in design, with curves and shapes that suggested intelligence behind their creation. He carefully examined each item, sketching and photographing everything. Each discovery hinted at a level of knowledge far beyond what he had expected, and the explorer felt a thrill at uncovering pieces of a puzzle that had remained hidden for centuries. As he moved to the far end of the room, a sudden noise stopped him cold. It was a metallic clatter, soft but unmistakable. He froze, holding his breath, listening intently. The sound echoed again, closer this time. His pulse quickened. He was not alone. Shadows shifted in the corners, but when he turned, there was nothing. Yet the feeling persisted, a sense of being watched, of something moving just beyond the edges of his perception. He reminded himself to stay calm, but he could not shake the unease that had settled over him. He pressed on, entering a large chamber that appeared to be the ship's engine room. The scale of the machinery was breathtaking. Massive gears, pipes, and mechanisms stretched in all directions, some moving slowly, others dormant. The hum he had been following seemed to originate here, a low vibration that resonated through the walls and floor. He traced the lines of the panels and levers, noticing symbols and markings that hinted at functions he could not understand. This was the heart of the ship, the source of its power and possibly the key to its mystery. While examining a large rusted panel, the explorer discovered a hidden compartment. Inside was a collection of journals, neatly stacked and surprisingly well preserved. He opened one carefully. The pages were filled with diagrams, notes, and observations. They described experiments, journeys into unknown lands, and encounters with phenomena that defied explanation. The writing was precise, meticulous, and often filled with warnings. Whoever had kept these records had understood the dangers of their mission and the importance of secrecy. Hours passed as he read through the journals. He learned that the ship had been part of a secret mission, designed to explore regions beyond known maps, to study forces and phenomena that few could comprehend. There were references to lands that might not even exist in the known world, and warnings about entities or forces that should never be disturbed. The explorer felt a mix of awe and fear. This was not just a discovery. It was a glimpse into a world that had been hidden, preserved by people whose vision and ambition had been extraordinary. Suddenly, a stronger vibration ran through the floor. He looked up to see lights flickering along the walls, some panels activating on their own. The ship was responding. The explorer felt a surge of adrenaline as he realized that whatever power lay at the heart of this vessel was still functional, still aware of intruders. The hum grew louder, almost like a heartbeat, and a sense of urgency took hold. He needed to understand what was happening before it was too late. Following the vibrations, he moved toward a massive doorway at the far end of the engine room. The doors slid open with a hiss, revealing a chamber larger than any he had entered before. In the center was a massive structure, a complex assembly of gears, panels, and glowing elements. It radiated energy, a force he could feel in his chest. He stepped closer, documenting every detail. This was no ordinary engine. It was a machine of incredible sophistication, far beyond what he had ever seen. As he examined the structure, he noticed faint inscriptions along the panels. They matched the symbols in the journals and on the walls above. The ship's design, its mission, and its power were all connected in ways he was only beginning to understand. He realized that this vessel had been capable of incredible journeys, possibly traveling to places beyond the known world, places that ordinary ships could never reach. The thought filled him with awe and fear. He was standing on the edge of knowledge few humans had ever touched. A sudden movement caught his attention. Shadows shifted near the edges of the room, subtle but undeniable. He froze, holding his breath, flashlight in hand. There was something or someone else here. Not human, perhaps, but certainly aware of his presence. The explorer's pulse quickened. He reminded himself to stay calm, to observe carefully. The unknown could be dangerous, but panic would not help him survive. He moved slowly, keeping his eyes on the shadows. The flickering lights revealed glimpses of shapes that defied explanation, forms that seemed to shift and change as he watched. The hum of the machinery grew louder, vibrating through the room, through the walls, through him. He realized that the ship itself might be alive in some sense, or at least aware of intruders in ways he could not comprehend. Every instinct told him to proceed with caution. In the center of the chamber, he discovered a console with a series of levers and switches. The symbols were familiar from the journals, and he realized that this might be the key to understanding the ship's purpose. He carefully traced the lines, pressing buttons and pulling levers in a sequence that matched the notes he had read. A soft whirring began, and lights along the machinery pulsed in response. The energy in the room intensified, and he felt a surge of power that left him breathless. Suddenly, a loud metallic clang echoed through the chamber. The shadows shifted violently, and the hum became a deep, resonant roar. Panels slid open, revealing hidden compartments filled with more instruments, charts, and devices. He realized that the ship was waking, responding to his actions, revealing parts of itself that had been dormant for centuries. The scale of the discovery was overwhelming. He was not merely exploring. He was interacting with a vessel of incredible intelligence and complexity. He spent hours studying the machinery, taking careful notes and photographs. Each detail mattered. The position of levers, the symbols on panels, the connections between devices. The journals had provided guidance, but the true understanding came only from observing the ship in action. He began to piece together a picture of its purpose. It was designed to explore the unknown, to study phenomena beyond human comprehension, and to preserve knowledge in a way that could survive time itself. As evening approached, the explorer realized he had been in the chamber far longer than he had intended. The hum of the ship had settled into a steady rhythm, a pulse that seemed to match his own heartbeat. He felt both exhilarated and exhausted. He knew that he had uncovered a major part of the mystery, but there was still much to learn. The ship's secrets were vast, and he was only beginning to scratch the surface. Returning to the deck, he secured his small boat and sat down, reflecting on the day's discoveries. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the water. The ship stood silent, immense, and mysterious. He felt a deep respect for the builders, the people who had created this vessel, and the knowledge they had left behind. At the same time, he knew that the ship's power and purpose could be dangerous if misunderstood. As night fell, the hum of the ship continued faintly, a reminder that it was still alive in some way, still aware, still holding secrets that he had yet to uncover. He felt a mixture of awe, fear, and determination.